somebody was tall. All right, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for coming out. My name is Stephen Valeri, and I am a developer at the Aave companies.
And I'm Ilija, also a developer at Aave companies.
So today we're going to just hopefully go through some of the really cool new features of Aave v3 that we're super excited about, and hope some of the builders come up with some cool stuff at the hackathon this week. Just kind of a quick run through of what Aave is in case somebody needs to set the context a little bit. Aave is a liquidity protocol. Currently we have about 21 billion LTV across 5 different markets and 3 different chains. So we're on Ethereum, Polygon, and Avalanche right now. Kind of a quick 101 on how it works. So suppliers can bring crypto assets to an Aave protocol and deposit it in order to earn interest. Also, if you have deposited these assets, you can use them as collateral to borrow against. So you can take out collateralized positions. Given that all of these positions are collateralized, the value of your collateral needs to be more than the value of the assets that you've borrowed. And to maintain that position, we introduce a role called liquidators. And they're responsible for monitoring the network, seeing when a collateralized position, the value of that collateral starts to drop. If it drops too much, they have the ability to pay back someone else's debt and then claim their collateral at a discounted price to avoid this potential for the positions not being over collateralized.
Not actually changing on the TV.
Crap. Let's see here. 1 second.
Do you have a selection like a PowerPoint?
Yeah. Haha.
All right.
Sweet.
So Stephen had introduced pretty well the basics of the Aave and the V2 of the Aave protocol. But now up to the exciting stuff, the V3, that is currently approved by the governance to be launched on 7 networks. And so still the same Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, but here you can kind of see, hopefully, the preview of the UI. It's still gonna expecting some tweaks to it, of course. So in addition to the chains that we use for V2, also the layer 2s are coming of optimistic rollups, Arbitrum and Optimism, as well as also Harmony and Phantom are coming as well. So you can kind of generally see the theme of going multi-chain and reducing the friction of being able to be active on multiple chains using Aave protocol. And of course, another big, large focus, as always, is safety and the security of the protocol. So with that said, the 3 kind of key features that we want to highlight today. First one is the portals. So that's the one which really kind of facilitates the multi-chain activity, and then efficiency mode, which kind of utilizes your capital efficiency in a much better way, and the isolation mode, making the entire protocol more nimble, but also adding new assets in a more secure way. So for the portals, so now that we have multiple chains, and as we know that sometimes when especially transition and move assets from layer 1 to layer 2 specifically and back to layer 1, that can take sometimes days. And that's a lot of friction. So portals are it's a huge feature to help out with that friction, as now we're going to be the protocol is going to be kind of integrated with the bridges, and the bridges have to be approved by the governance because there's some element of risk, but that is sort of mitigated by the governance approval and some more technical aspects that Stephen will kind of help cover.
Yeah. So for these portals, to the end user, it will pretty much be instantly moving your liquidity from one chain to another. But if you take a look under the hood, how it works, to start, first you kind of have to understand what an A token is. So when you supply assets to an Aave pool, you get in return A tokens. So A tokens are kind of one-to-one backed with this underlying asset. So if you think about that in a multi-chain world, you might be on an L2 like Arbitrum and want to bridge to Ethereum. In that case, you would burn the A tokens and start moving the underlying tokens to the destination chain, which in this case is Ethereum. In this case also, that would take about 7 days because of the challenge period. But we would expect that the bridge protocol could instead run their own validator and have a oracle on the destination chain as well, so that they would instantly know and be able to trust that their bridge transaction for the underlying tokens has happened already. Given that, the bridge protocol can now mint quote unquote unbacked A tokens in the destination chain. So they're not really unbacked, they're just unbacked on the Ethereum chain. And the underlying tokens will follow in about 7 days. So at that point, once the A tokens are on the destination chain, you can exchange those for the actual underlying tokens from the liquidity pool in the destination chain and give it back to the end user. And then in 7 days, when the underlying tokens arrive, the bridge protocol would fulfill the Aave liquidity pool. So obviously this introduces a pretty significant amount of risk. So bridge protocols would have to be highly scrutinized before being added and given this privilege. There are also mint limits that governance will set so that only a certain amount of A tokens can be minted at a time without the underlying. And finally, there are also fees associated with this service.
Yeah, I'm personally super excited to use this feature from my activities multi-chain. So the next feature is efficiency mode, and this one is also very useful for certain strategies that are relying on sort of supplying and borrowing liquidity from the same asset category, specifically for the correlated assets. So of course, stablecoins is a big piece of it, as well as the different ETH variants. So wrapped ETH, and then Bitcoin variants of wrapped BTC or Rand BTC. So they're all correlated. So in a way, we recognize that there's less risk involved if only assets from each kind of category are involved on the supply and the borrowing side. So we are able to provide kind of less friction as well as better ability to leverage up, and that opens up sort of like new strategies as well as makes certain current strategies better in yield farming.
Yeah, it's a super interesting feature, and excited to see how people use it. And I think also even in the stablecoin market, it could have a pretty large impact on stabilizing some of those different coins because you can borrow them at such high efficiency. So isolation mode is another feature that's introduced with V3. This allows you governance to introduce new tokens that can be used as collateral in the market in an isolated way and in a risk-reduced way. So what does that mean? So in this example, we have token 2, and governance can vote to add that token to the Aave market and allow it to be used as collateral in isolation mode. So if you're in isolation mode, that means that you can only borrow in stablecoins. and there's a protocol limit to the amount that can be borrowed for that asset that's being used as collateral. So that means for token 2, you might set a mint limit for the protocol at 100 million. So the total exposure for the protocol can be managed through governance. And this allows a lot of flexibility in figuring out what assets you want to list and can list while reducing risk to the total market. Because currently, as soon as you add an asset as collateral, there's no way to manage the exposure. So that really increases and has a high ceiling of quality and low risk for this token. Whereas in isolation mode, we can probably start introducing tokens earlier that we're maybe less confident in, but are still excited about, and just have it in this isolation mode, and over time potentially increase that ceiling for debt. Yeah, so it should be very exciting, and I think this almost introduces the potential for somewhat permissionless listing, where you can almost have like a curve of the total debt you'd allow, and over time that could potentially increase or something like that. So additional features, we went through 3 of the main ones, but a white paper was released around some of these features, and there's a ton packed into what we released here. So some additional ones are supply and borrow caps. This additionally allows for more fine-grained risk management for the protocol and how they want to manage different assets. Risk admins, so right now every single configuration update is going through the entire governance process, which is a pretty significant amount of overhead. With risk admins, we introduce the ability to elect someone more or less as a risk admin, and they can make these market configuration updates. Price Oracle Sentinels, so this is an interesting L2 feature where if the Sentinel is down, you can kind of check to make sure that, or the sequencer essentially, you check to make sure that the sequencer is still up, which in case the sequencer happens to go down in these earlier days, you essentially get a bit of a buffer. Just some other ones to highlight here. We don't need to go through all of them. The permit function, so I'm sure everyone's used to approve and transfer 2 functions and 2 transactions, a bit of a pain. We're introducing the EIP 2612, where you can sign and transfer. So it's only 1 transaction and 1 signed message, which when you combine that with L2s is like a totally different UI experience and super nice. And I think something that the dev team is pretty proud of is gas reduction. So despite all of these new features, I think it's about 15 to 20% less gas consumption. And there's also some cool L2 gas optimizations coming out, which is pretty bleeding edge. So shout out to Emilio and Lasse on the smart contracts team, crushing it there. All right, so prizes. There are prizes for the IRL hackathon as well as the online hackathon. You can see the amounts here. We're obviously looking forward and hoping to see some of the devs building on these cool new V3 features. Some of the things that we might look for would be highly leveraged tokenized positions. So that would use the high efficiency mode. Something else that you could build would be a bridge protocol using the portals feature. Let's see, what are some of the other ideas that we had here? Protocol credit delegation based on credit scores. That would be nice, super interesting. Maybe you look at the reputation of a certain address or something to that extent. Automated market management. So maybe you look at the state of the chain, certain volume or volatility metrics for a certain asset, and based on that, maybe have a bot running that would serve as a risk admin and make configuration updates. I think there's also room in our governance where the AIP process, you could, essentially if you wanted to list a new asset or change a market configuration, have a nice UI where rather than having to kind of hard code all of the proposal, you could just kind of nicely through this UI select and create a proposal. Yeah, so let's see, one or two other ones. Monitoring assets that could potentially be listed in Aave. So there's a few things that we generally look for, and that includes it needing a chain link oracle. It should probably have certain volatility metrics as well as volume metrics to make it a good candidate. So having something to highlight those candidates could be pretty cool. And yeah, I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or want to talk in more detail about any hackathon ideas or just generally V3 or what's going on at the Aave companies, come by the booth. And I don't know, do we have any time for questions? Yeah, I think we have about 4 minutes if anyone has any questions.
Where is the booth?
The booth is on the second floor of the sports castle. If you go up the first ramp, it's the fourth booth on the left. Cool. Let's see, maybe there's one or two other features we could go through here.